And it is 12:02, and we'll call the meeting to order. Gail Siebert, the vice chair. I don't know what I'm going to be in the future, but we'll stick with that for now. We'll do a roll call.
Do you want me to do it, or do you have it in front of you?
No, I do have a list of people. I just don't have the agenda part of
Okay.
it. So I'm going to need you to verbally say you're here if I call your name, when I call your name. Alex Garano, it's not here. Sam Hockenberry.
Present.
Thank you. Karen McMaster.
Here.
John Sager. Need you to be verbal, John, and unmute yourself.
Present.
Thank you. Don Valerio, absent. Doug Butler, absent. Lauren Davis Connolly, absent. Karen DeJoy.
Present.
Theo Knoll, absent. Carol Plotkin.
Here.
Gail Siebert here. And Jonathan Shines. Okay, great. Okay, we got the attendance. Now, Miss Elliott, if you could take over and at least run through the agenda, be great. Or no, whoever's got lead here.
Sure. Noah's more than welcome to do it. So the first thing is called order, then you did roll of attendance, or roll call. And now we're in the discussion section. We'll be reviewing the revisions to draft goals and strategies, and then also reviewing next steps for the housing production plan. So with that, I can turn it over to Noah.
Great, thank you, Sam. Yeah, I'm going to share some slides with some takeaways for myself, at least from the last two events we had in the last 2 weeks. And then wanted to just open it up for some open discussion to hear what you guys thought, any big takeaways or things that I might have missed. And then transition to going through those just goals and strategies one more time, got them all up in the slides and thinking about, those things we might have missed, words to tweak, new strategies to add based on what we heard at our in-person and virtual events.
How was the before you start there? I didn't end up making it because I had some family commitments. But how was the turnout for that?
I would say neither of our events had super strong turnout. The first one, I believe more. I think there were 5 or 6 folks that came in person, and then 5 or 6 that were there virtually, and we had a good discussion at the end. Last week just had, I think, just one or two members of the public besides us there. Yeah.
Okay.
I will just recap that in a little bit more as I jump into here. Just wanted to show you guys just quickly where we are, and we're winding down with the plan. Phase 4, finalizing, getting things done. It says May 2025, but I think we may have a town council presentation at the very end of May or first week in June. But we're going to keep everything on track there. But I'll just do it, community forums. What we heard, these are things for myself. We prepare written summaries of comments, and we're happy to share those for you guys to read through. And I wanted to talk through things that stuck in my mind. We had a conversation after the first forum. At the very end, we did sort of report outs after everyone had gone around and gone through the boards with their sticky notes. And one piece that we talked about for a few moments was communicating the advantages of gentle density, which is something I think we've talked about in this committee as well, particularly maybe not higher density apartment style housing, but townhomes, cottages, those accessory dwelling units, things that let people stay in the community. Ways that we can maybe work communicating those opportunities more in our goals and strategies. The second are the opportunities for vacant, undersized lots in town. Sam had done an analysis and identified 600 that were privately and municipally owned that don't have anything on them right now or underutilized. This is just a quick map I mocked up showing them all over the place and thinking, how do we turn this into a strategy. What are things the town could do? How could the town take advantage of existing land that's not developed right now, where we could have some more affordable housing, family-focused housing, housing for seniors. So some real cool opportunities there.
Noah, just to
Yeah,
chime in, sorry to
yeah, of
interrupt,
course.
but the map, do the colors mean anything, or is it just so that everything stands out?
Absolutely nothing. No, just no, they're just showing you where those parcels are all around. But
Okay.
and Sam and I are going to talk about this today, maybe making a map of just town-owned parcels, sort of drilling down into so it'll be fewer than this right now, but I just wanted to illustrate like there's a lot of land all over town. But yeah, hope that answered your question,
No,
Sam.
no, I definitely think though, you should keep, even if it's not town owned, I think you should put it
Mhm.
on there because, you know, if we can sway developers to look at those parcels and, you know, when they go up for sale or something, it'd be worthwhile because I think that's what I'm seeing is that all of a sudden there is like a vacant thing and now I look over and there's like a, you know, a McMansion going up on it. You're like, ah, dude, I wish we, you
Yeah,
know, wish somebody would have
maybe
known that.
just
We
for
could have like pushed it in a different direction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that also helps plug into just something that the state looks for when you make your housing plan are real parcels that you're saying, here's where we want to see some development and here's the type of development we want to see. So I think that would be really cool. So maybe we'll have multiple maps, you know, to drill down to developers, to the town and to homeowners too. So this is something to keep in mind when we go through the draft strategies. And another point of our conversation two Wednesdays ago at the in-person forum was one gentleman mentioned like, yes, you've talked a little bit about dealing with some of the impacts of housing that people get around, but maybe just communicating that we're thinking that we're not just trying to add a bunch of cars to the road by talking about new housing. We're trying to be thoughtful about where we put it in walkable areas of town, trying to make sure that we're also planning for how people are going to get around or investing in transit and making sure things are accessible too. So just something there to change wording maybe a little bit, but not huge changes, but want to make sure that so much of this is about education and communication and saying, yes, totally, new housing is going to bring some challenges for it. I want to have some good planning around that as well. And then, yeah, finally from forum number one, I just took away some support for those shared housing models, supportive housing, say where you could live with maybe independent living facilities or maybe some sort of group co-housing situation. But there is, I think, support and interest in building community alongside new housing. And also communicating that, I think, will be really powerful for people who maybe are skeptical or unsure about new housing in Wakefield, but could really get back into that opportunity mindset if we illustrate how this helps people stay here, helps people feel better connected. Those are really powerful, I think, options. Oh, and I just added an image of one over in Revere. So this would be not the scale that we're talking about in Wakefield, but it is an affordable housing development that's going to have on-site supportive services for folks with disabilities. And I think that was something from the meeting that I missed about a month ago that we tweaked one of the goals to talk about seniors and folks with disabilities. So just wanted to say that there are people working on similar housing developments or things in this vein in the greater Boston area that we can draw some inspiration from. So forum number two, I had just far fewer takeaways from that. It was a similar presentation and really appreciate all you guys being there. We did have one comment at the very end that has stuck with me over the last week, which was, yes, we need to take care of our seniors. Yes, we need to focus on accessibility needs, but also what about struggling families that are having a hard time making ends meet, and they're the future of so many of our places. So to me, that's an intention today, is thinking about how, when we go through these goals and strategies, can we make sure that we take in account of them too. And I think it's something that Theo, who's I believe not here today, but has been mentioning too throughout the plan. Second of all, this was just a final Bob note, which was ask the town council to put the HPP on the agenda twice a year, maybe in June and in December. just to keep it top of mind, review progress, and get ready to prepare the next HPP in 2030. So I'm going to unshare here and wanted to, if it's okay with the chair, to ask any of the committee members about thoughts and comments and things that they took away, reactions to whatever I was presenting, and then go for that.
Floor is open for discussion. Oops, do you have to stop?
I think you captured it really well, Noah. I had the
Any
opportunity.
comments?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
thank
great.
you.
Thanks, Gail. I had the opportunity to be at both sessions and think you captured it really well. And in addition to what you wrote, a lot of the discussion centered on the goals that we already had. So that was excuse me, it felt like we were in a good place.
Mhm. Yeah, that is it's good to hear. Thank you, Carol. Appreciate that. Other thoughts and takeaways, Sam?
Yeah, I think a huge part of the discussion was just trying to come at how do multiple ways to explain the same thing. Like there was discussion about, do we explain it through economic development? Do we explain it through, artistic merit, as it were, like visual versus just data, trying to find different ways to explain the topics and the ideas to people who learn and understand things in different ways. So as long as we're providing a well-rounded approach to how to present the information, that seems to be an important part.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing that kind of set my mind. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And basically, the next step after this is we over here at my firm are going to go to the drawing board and write up a narrative chapter with the goals and strategies that we decide on today. And so that can definitely include, especially in our communication goals that I'll talk about in just a second, communicating those different ways. So yeah, I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind. Anybody else have any thoughts or comments or questions? And Jonathan, you're off the hook. You're about to get to see our draft goals and strategies. So I'd love to hear your thoughts after we roll through them.
Absolutely. No, I was not at either of the two public forums. So I'm just going to say, it seems like you did a great job, Noah.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So no other comments. So move to the next steps then, Noah.
Let's do it. Yeah, so I'm going to share my screen again in a second and basically going to slowly roll through. We have our 6 goals. So I like to just go through them, have a little pause, see if there's any comments. I'm going to write notes down and then we'll get the meeting all finished up and talk about the calendar. So let's roll into goal number 1. Which is to achieve and maintain Wakefield's 10% status on the state's subsidizing housing inventory. Didn't get any huge comments at either of the forums on changing that or anyone disagreeing with it. And I feel like, yeah, the consensus that I'm hearing is we're pretty what's the word for it? Oh, sorry about that, y'all. Happy with where the goal is for now. But let's look at the strategies. Let's talk through these 3 and then I'll pause for a second. And keep this up for reference, of course. But plan strategy 1.1 is something that Bob was really hitting for this project, which is making sure that we're not letting the next HBP have a period where there's no certified or approved one in Wakefield. So planning for the next one. Strategy 1.2 is creating what's called a local preference policy. We've talked about this before, but just for the benefit, it's a way to allocate up to 70% of your affordable units to folks that are residents that work in the community. And there's a couple other categories that we have written down. And you have to do a planning process for it to make sure that you don't run afoul of any fair housing law sort of impediments. But it is a way to offer affordable housing to people that are local in the community, which can be helpful. And 1.3 is all about ensuring that your existing affordable housing units, and Wakefield's been adding a ton through inclusionary zoning, that it's available, that it is maintained, that it's representative, that you're helping ensure that those numbers of units on the SHI, that those stay there. And also that they're being offered at rents that are affordable, that are consistent with whatever the agreements are that the town made with them. And that can be through, that's going to be through the Metro North RHSO, which does that, and you're already part of it, so that's sort of maintaining it.
I'm sorry, wait,
any
on
thoughts
that
here?
one, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Sam, on
Oh, please.
the MNRHSO, is that the thing that that the housing trust is gonna pay for to be a member of? Just to make sure I've got the same ones.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, just wanted to make sure I was paged on
No,
there. Okay, sorry, no.
That's great to know, and when I'm doing the write-up, just saying, putting that in there, I think is helpful, so. Yeah, please, no apologies for interrupting me, like, this is all super helpful, and yeah, I just appreciate all the questions.
I'm sorry, can I go back to
Let's do it.
the 1.2?
Yeah,
I think another thing to add, and this is actually because of a personal thing, is
sure.
not only affordable units to Wakefield residents and other community members, but potentially like members of their family. So for example, like my son doesn't live in Wakefield because he can't afford it. Not that he doesn't want to live in Wakefield. He grew up in Wakefield, but he can't afford Wakefield now.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's any way to add wording. As I said, it came up when I was looking at the I think it was it was one of the ones that came up to buy a condo. I dropped the name out of the place, but it had the Wakefield residence, and I'm like, well, like Mitchell, my son was a Wakefield resident for 25 years, but he can't be here now because he can't afford it.
Gail, are you talking about the local preference component?
Yes.
That wasn't supposed to be advertised. It's against fair housing regulations, and I had asked them to take it out, and it did not get taken out once it got advertised.
Okay.
You are not legally allowed to notice or advertise or share that there's a local preference component. You can have a local preference, but you can't advertise it. So just as a side note, because it does deter people, or it makes people feel like they will lose out on the opportunity if they don't live in the area already. So it's not supposed to be advertised and shouldn't be advertised in the future.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. But then part of this policy, the 1.2 that we have, is that legal then or illegal? To say that we're going to create housing for a local preference.
It is legal, and I think Sam's also just touching on something that is the question is, is it it's legal in Massachusetts, but it can run afoul of like just the spirit of the fair housing law. And also the idea that you're even touching on, Gail, is that, well, there's people who don't live in Wakefield right now who would love to live there, and they're not going to get preference on that. So it's in effect, the policy lets you limit up to 70% of your units for people who work in Wakefield, who live in Wakefield, or there's a couple other categories. I don't believe you can add extra categories like people who have formerly lived in Wakefield. But
it also technically, I believe, includes children of people who live in Wakefield. There's a whole list of criteria.
Okay.
But I can't. I'd have to double check it. But all I'm talking about is advertising. You can have one, you just can't advertise it. That's it.
Yeah. And at the very end of the plan, we have a bunch of attachments, and so it'll have a list of everyone that you could have in there. And I believe the state last year added veterans to the pool too. So it is changing and being updated as time goes on. But
sorry about that.
Okay. But so I think that is, if anyone wants to debate like including that in there, I thought it, just from a lot of the community engagement of keeping people in Wakefield, that would be interesting to keep, but I'm open to entertaining like debates about it too. And also questions like, did I see I think I saw Jonathan. Yeah, Jonathan, your hands raised.
No, I had a question that then Sam answered, but then I just had another question that sort of
Sure.
popped up. How, uh, if you think about a local policy preference, like is that, how is that enforceable, right? So, operationally, if it's not something that we could advertise that we have, um, when you go through sort of the housing lottery process, does it actually have any bearing in terms of, how units are distributed? Do you kind of, if you have, say, a 70% local preference, do you almost do like a separate lottery for, people that fall into one of those preferential categories to fill up the 70% and then kind of open it up to everyone else? Like, just logistically, how does it work?
I've never designed one or administered. I've read through some documents and PowerPoints on the analyses they do before to make sure it's legal. But no, it is a good question. I'd have to do more research on it, on what happens if there aren't enough local people to get in there, how it functionally works. Yeah, I wish I had a better answer. Maybe
Yeah.
Sam. Maybe Sam.
I have not
I guess
been
that,
on the side of administering it, so I don't definitively know. But I can reach out to just to get a clear answer on how that would work, to one of the affordable housing lottery consultants that we've collaborated with that developers have paid for.
yeah, because certainly for me, the worst possible scenario would be if you end up in a situation where for some reason you have housing units that aren't, kind of being allocated or being used because of a local preference option that, maybe, turning people away. I mean, obviously, we want to make sure if we're building affordable housing that people are actually living in it. And so it'd be helpful just to understand how the process works so that, um, I think we can evaluate whether that's a barrier to housing for, certain folks, or, a barrier to, kind of the timely access to housing for individuals as well.
Really good point. And it is tough for people who are not from Wakefield who maybe want to live there for whatever reasons, or you are from Wakefield and you don't fall in that category. That means on paper, at least only a third of the units can be allocated to you. But I think Sam's going to do some research, and then in my write-up, I'm going to add some more too. And well, maybe even we could consider, like, some of our other strategies you'll see have the word study or consider in there, and that could be just here too, the same thing of, and you have to do a study for it regardless. So it wouldn't be something that the town could just flip a switch on overnight.
So if we would have to do a study regardless, I would suggest probably wording it as consider or evaluate or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, and typically, just as a side note, for developments, we don't pay for it. The developer pays for it. And it's been established out of all the ones that we've had a local preference component, there's been no issue qualifying for that. So at least in the past, obviously, I don't know what it'll be like going forward. But again, I'm happy to reach out. From what I remember, the last one I read, if the units, it's just up to 70%. And if there are not enough people in the lottery, or not enough local people, then it would just go out to everybody else.
All right, I'm going to keep this rolling along so we can just be aware of time. Let's go to goal number 2, which is promoting a range of housing options that meet the needs of extremely low, very low, low, and middle income households. Those are just kind of all of the different income buckets. And wanted to make sure, include middle income households too, that might not qualify for affordable housing, or you think you're middle income and you do, and ensuring that some of our strategies just meet these very disparate needs. So 2.1, talked about this a little bit, but I'll just explain it for the benefit. Exploring an affordable housing overlay that could allow zoning relief and extra density for 100% affordable development projects. Cambridge and Somerville both have these. Cambridge has seen, I think, 1,000 units of housing built over the last decade or so that they've had it. Somerville hasn't had it for quite as long, but there are a few projects in the pipeline, like redeveloping a YMCA, putting some housing on top of it. And it means that if you are an affordable housing developer, a nonprofit, so you're building that 100% affordable housing, you get some extra density. You don't have to go get as many of those discretionary approvals, and it helps the project pencil out. So one idea is just exploring what that could look like in Wakefield, and maybe there's tying it into some of the parcels we talked about earlier, where you could have your overlay only map onto 5 or 6 parcels over town. That could then help with the financial feasibility of the project if you go that route. 2.2 is a little wonky, but what it really means is you can establish a property tax exemption for affordable housing in Wakefield. It's some state law. It's been on the books for a few years. I was looking and it seemed like there was one town on the Cape, I believe it was Wellfleet, that has this, and you have to fill out a bunch of forms and file them with the town, and you can get a property tax reduction for offering your unit as an affordable rate. One idea was try to market these to folks building accessory dwelling units, so get those extra ADUs that are now allowed in most of the town to be affordable too, and incentivize the property owner, because the numbers can be tough if building an ADU costs $200,000 or $300,000, then being able just to pay the mortgage back that you got, pay back the loan, sometimes that doesn't line up with affordable housing. So thoughts on how to make that a little more feasible. And the last one is just the idea of similarly launching a planning process, community engagement feasibility study with Mass Development, who I believe offers these services. They're a quasi-public agency, and looking at a few of the properties in town that have been mentioned through the survey and interviews a few times, like the Herd School. There's some great examples that you'll see in the write-up of other places and other cities and towns here in Massachusetts that have done similar things, and Wakefield itself, I believe it's the Lincoln School, turning that into affordable senior housing. And then just 2 more here for strategies, and then please stop me or slow me down if anything's confusing. Second, 2.4 is just monitoring how the Renters Assistance Program is going to determine how effective it is, maybe where people might be getting tripped up, or maybe it's oversubscribed and might be tapping into a huge need and needs some more funding and revenue, and that's its own conversation. So just monitoring that, I think it's a really cool program. And then 2.5, I think this was a suggestion from Sam a couple months ago. I was doing some research on it this morning, and there are examples of other towns in New England that have done sort of bulk purchasing to get the cost of energy retrofits down, helping reduce them. And that's something that comes from the survey as well, reading through people saying that they're happy with their home, they want to stay in it, but they're concerned about how energy efficient it is and how accessible it is. So this is just one way to chip away at that energy efficiency problem, which is a huge housing affordability cost. Maybe if you own your home and are on a fixed income or just lower income. So I'm going to stop sharing there and just pause and say, anything there that you guys were like confused about or thought, hey, let's throw another idea in the mix. And also no worries if you're just like, oh yeah, Jonathan, go for it.
Sorry, just on the second strategy, do you know, is that like a home rule petition that we would have to do to work with that, or how, again, just logistically, how does that work?
I believe it is something that you can pass at the local level, and what I'll do in the write-up is have links in every single section, so you can go and read the state law. This was something that popped up on our mass planners listserv a month or 2 ago, and Sam flagged. But it's been around for a few years, and I don't think you'd have to file a home rule petition because it's state law at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Carol.
You're muted, Carol.
Yeah, thanks. On the next slide, the one about bulk purchasing for energy, which is great. Let's see, yeah. 2.5. Could it also be helping to reduce the cost for much needed home modernization efforts? Could it also include the word accessibility for improvements for accessibility? I'm thinking about people with disabilities, seniors, etc. Just because this sounds like it's just energy retrofits.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that wouldn't be too difficult to add a couple words there. I will say a little further down we have working with, I believe it's Habitat at Greater Lowell is Wakefield's area, and supporting them for doing more accessibility and critical home repairs. But
Right.
I don't think it would be a problem to mention it multiple times and not preclude the town from exploring something like that for accessibility upgrades. I think it's a good idea.
And if it's somewhere else and it's more appropriate there, that's fine. It's not critical.
Oh, no, yeah, I'm leaning towards putting it in there too, just so it's, you know, down the line, if someone really wants to champion that, you can point to here and say, hey, it's an idea that we talked about and thought was a good idea.
As a side note, to build off of what Carol was just talking about, there is a state program called the Home Modification Program, which gives, I can't remember if it's no interest or low interest, but there are loans and I believe possibly some grants for home modifications
Mhm.
for accessibility, both for people with disabilities and those over the age of 60. And that also can be utilized towards building an ADU, up to $50,000, I believe.
That's awesome. We'll definitely want to plug that resource, I think, in the write-up this section a few times. Any other thoughts before I move on to goal number 3? Alrighty, let's keep moving along. Goal number 3, I think the salient topic, addressing the housing needs of residents with disabilities and seniors. And there's I think 2 slides here. 3.1, fostering accessible and service-enriched housing development at key locations, such as through the disposition of town-owned property and/or through supporting private development. So I think that could feed back into this list of town-owned sites that we're talking about a little bit through the working with mass development for something like the Herd School doing its own planning process, but also just, yeah, kind of being a broader catch-all strategy there. And this might be a place to throw a map of town-owned property sites that are vacant currently. 3.2, going to have some images of cottageport and townhome style housing that could be appropriate in certain parts of Wakefield. Trying to hone in on the transportation aspect too by saying, let's try to focus this development in areas that are walkable, that are in the sort of downtown area of town or a couple blocks away. So folks maybe aren't all having to have 2 or 3 cars per household, and they can walk to amenities, walk for errands, or take the train someplace. So also trying to take advantage of those lots. And 3.3 is something I've seen on Martha's Vineyard and also in some other Cape towns, both on the Cape and the islands. It's just a home matching program where there's a third party and they vet folks. You have to submit documents and it's a way to match seniors that might be have a lot of extra space and are looking for some extra income. This was a conversation we had at the first forum, just how many people have more bedrooms than they need, and maybe as we've identified some real trouble with rising property taxes, with energy costs, the need for accessibility upgrades, this could be a way to help out some struggling folks. So those are thoughts there. I'll just pause here before I read some more and wanted to see if there's any hands raised or clarifications that we could talk through. Cool. Well, I'm happy to go back here in a second if anything comes to mind. 3.4, just talking about partnering with Habitat over in Lowell to provide grants for home modification programs. This is where it could plug the program that Sam mentioned as well. Those grants are low or no interest loans. Because again, people in the survey said, I want to stay in my home, but I'm not sure about whether it's going to meet my accessibility needs in the next 10 years. And 3.5, I'm thinking, was doing some research on ways to be pragmatic about this, because one of the comments at the forum was not sure if the town would be interested in financially supporting a housing and transition coordinator. One thought was maybe exploring some sort of shared staffing agreement with maybe another town or two where someone could help for both of those. The town might, or I believe the town already does that for a few positions. But yeah, wondered if anyone had any thoughts about this, a housing and/or transition coordinator and ways to I don't know what the word is. Yeah, be strategic or pragmatic about how we phrase that in the plan. Do you think there would be an appetite for it, Carol?
Well, I don't know whether there'd be a town appetite for it. We've been talking about it, excuse me, on the Council on Aging. I've been thinking about a volunteer corps of people, even
Hmm.
like the Snow Angels that the senior center sponsors for kids to shovel for seniors and other people. And there may be a way that we could get a core of people who could help if we couldn't have it town funded. So just thinking about that,
Yeah,
there aren't funds for it.
I like that. I mean, maybe just adding a sentence at the end, in the shorter term, working with the
Mhm.
Council on Aging, and that sounds fantastic. Yeah, Jonathan.
Thanks. And Carol, I think that's a great suggestion of having like a volunteer corps there. I actually think there'd be a lot of people who would be interested in doing that. But just the only point I wanted to make on that last one is it probably makes sense to also have an understanding as to what extent our social services manager in the Health and Human Services Department does some of this work as well, because she does a fair amount of housing support for people as part of her day-to-day work. And so we may be doing some of this already in a different form. And, you know, as we think about this and as we think about Carol's suggestion and the idea of regionalization, it may not necessarily be a person, but, looking at making sure that we have a plan to provide the service based on some combination of existing town resources, regional resources, volunteers, and so forth.
Yeah, I like that. I think it'll be similar, consider and having these 2 or 3 different pieces. So I think this one will have some rewording you guys will notice later on, and try to be a little more realistic and encapsulate that. Appreciate that, Jonathan. Yeah, Karen.
Yeah, just quickly. So Mystic Valley Elder Services, I used to work there, and as a social worker, you're always looking for and helping people find that. So that kind of wraps in with them too. If you have the resources or if you have something, then you kind of dish it out to them and they kind of pull together. If you have a new technique, I mean, those are other people that are constantly looking for housing options. So if they know something's new in Wakefield, then they will tap into it and do that. So I think there's a lot of people that are doing that. Thank you.
That's great. Yeah, I think we can mention that there's already some great infrastructure. There's maybe an opportunity for some volunteers too to fill in the gaps if there are any.
Noah, just if
Yeah.
I can jump in too, Carol, some of the other housing authorities too have resident service coordinators. And like Harry McMasters was saying, Mystic Valley Elder Services, will partner with them as well. But they meet, I think almost weekly, I believe before. But some of the resident service coordinators may also be helpful when we want to develop some of these plans to do this. And they have good resources that will help seniors and families as well. So some of the housing authorities already employ them. And it's worth, maybe reaching out and say, well, how do you get your sources in place and whatever. But I worked with them before, so I know that they have the ability to reach out when families or elders need services as well. Just a thought.
Great.
Thanks. Great suggestion. I will note that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, just thank you all for your suggestions. This is super helpful, and I'm glad we're able to have this meeting, and appreciate you guys making time in your schedules. Yeah, Sam.
So I think that maybe the language around this should be looking into how to coordinate existing infrastructure or having somebody, just like help figure out how to sort people or how to get information about all of these resources made available, right?
Yeah.
I don't know about any of these. I'm sure lots of people don't know about all of these things that are out there. So just like, how do we actually put together the information and the quasi-public resources that are available, and how do we help coordinate that? Might be a better descriptor than hiring another person who does all of the things that are already being done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is some good fodder for rewriting this section and then adding a few paragraphs on these little pieces you guys have been sharing. All right, I'm gonna keep us rolling along because we've got 2 more strategies to get through. I want to get us through before the lunch hour is over. But we'll be rewriting 3.5. Number 4. So this is going back just, I think, to the broader housing production and affordability question, which is encouraging a balanced mix of housing types and scaled development in strategic locations. I'm going to read, these are more zoning programming initiative ideas. One is thinking about how your zoning maybe doesn't line up with things that are built on the ground. And Medford's an example of they're redoing all their zoning right now, just to at the very least ensure that the zoning doesn't say that the home that's been there for 100 years shouldn't be there, and gives the homeowner a headache when they're doing modifications or in addition. So one thing there is yeah, what are those low-hanging fruit, those small barriers that might hurt someone from just building an ADU in their backyard because the zoning doesn't line up with what's built there with the parcel, which is much more common, unfortunately, than we'd like to see. 4.2, studying the feasibility of converting vacant commercial spaces into mixed-use residential housing. Something we heard at the very beginning of this project, where there are some empty storefronts on Main Street. There's maybe a need to do some revitalization there, and what are some ways that you could add housing into that. Someone had mentioned, I believe at the first forum, that a few of the blocks on Main Street used to have taller buildings, and there were some fires, I think, in the last century that brought them down. So there's some historical context to adding mixed use housing there, and not losing the great Main Street feel. And I think we've got a thing on that on the next slide. So 4.3 is just a similar, as just sort of a housekeeping. How is your MBTA district going? And this could be something not to do this year, but next year. Have you received any applications, any interest in building in them? Is there feedback from developers saying this particular requirement means I can't build anything at all? And since you were proactive and put together MBTA districts in these areas, putting those to the best use possible, concentrating the growth in the areas that the town's approved, I think will be thoughtful and a good thing to do. Then 4.4 is just touching back onto that transportation aspect, which is considering a transportation action plan or a mobility one, some sort of transportation strategy. And I found an example from Newton that could be helpful for how people are going to get around. The roads aren't getting any wider or any bigger, but we are a slowly growing population, and people want to live in places like Wakefield. So being thoughtful about that, and maybe there's some town or regional shuttle ideas that we could include in there. There's some opportunities, but it's a way for folks that are like, yeah, traffic is really bad. It's really tough to get around town. You're talking about adding more cars and parking on the street. Well, this is a way to have a community-driven plan and be thoughtful about that aspect of it too. Plans for parking, plans for managing all of those spaces. There's some opportunities there. I should stop because I've talked for a little bit, but any raised hands or questions, things I could clarify or thoughts on fixing anything? Okay, not seeing any, but feel free to interrupt me if something comes to mind. So this is 4.5 is going back to that Main Street idea. And this is a planning idea I've mentioned a few times, which is a form-based code in Wakefield's downtown, which is a form of zoning that really thinks about the look and feel of a place, really tries to say, what are the design aspects that make us like to walk down Main Street and be there, so that any new development can be like that. Just finished up Danvers housing production plan, and they put a form-based code in their downtown, and they've seen some real interest in building there. And a lot of it is adaptively reusing the existing buildings and honoring the existing context, but also adding new units, and some of those are affordable. So it should be the same case in Wakefield. 4.6 is going over into an affordable housing development capacity sort of strategy, which is suggesting or exploring joining the North Suburban Home Consortium, a way to access HUD home funds that it offers to municipalities, and basically joining a group of other municipalities like Malden and Medford that pool their resources and work on affordable housing. And Malden's been able to build some great projects. Medford, one example was just buying some existing homes, rehabilitating them, and making those affordable. So there's, even if there is not a lot of funding or affordable housing development in Wakefield, what are those regional partnerships that you could explore being part of? Folks that are just right down the street. 4.7, last one, and then I'll pause, is considering updating your zoning to permit rear hammerhead or mid-block lots. So those parcels that I think that are a little awkwardly shaped, but could be a gentle form of infill that could be appropriate for Wakefield. So not big apartment buildings, but maybe a few extra units here and there. Something that's peeking out in the back and there's still room for a yard and trees and all the great stuff. Some ideas there for more gentle density on underutilized land. Any thoughts there? Anything I could clarify or thoughts? Hey, let's reword this section. And we got 2 more goals after this, and then we'll be all done.
I have a comment on that
Yeah.
last one. I'm sorry, this is just more of a thought, not necessarily a change
Sure.
in strategy, but I don't know as it relates to the map that was put together with housing. So that made me think about the fact that like we have the neighbor that's on the other side of us has a huge piece of property. And for years, we were always a little concerned about like, oh my God, what if somebody were to come in, a for-profit developer were to come in, and you could easily put in a huge, a multifamily housing, not just a couple of townhomes, but now it won't turn out to be that way because the son took over the property and they added an ADU, so it's going to stay single family. But I don't know if this relates to, I'm sorry, I'm sort of just like conveying my thoughts as opposed to like not changing anything. But the concern would be is that depending on how some of these things get structured, it's one thing for a family that owns it to want to put an ADU on. It's another thing when a big developer was to come in and take a large piece of property and turn it into what would be too dense for the neighborhood. I think it gets back to what the fear is of the neighbors around the herd.
Yeah.
That they don't mind if there's housing there necessarily, but they don't want this, huge, like, I don't know, whatever, like more than like, let's say 12 units going in there and just like overwhelming this little neighborhood that they have. So I don't know if that gets worked out in zoning or planning board or how that works, but I would just want to be cautious that you don't end up pissing off, a bunch of neighbors.
Yeah,
By all of a sudden the town putting something like this in.
Gail, just to give you a little clarity, it would depend on how, if this were to move forward, it would, what would happen would depend on how the bylaw overlay, et cetera, zoning category, however it's phrased. It would depend on how it's worded. Most special permit, right now, all special permits are reviewed by the Zoning Board of Appeals. If there was some avenue that this could be done on a staff level or whatever, on a standard permit by right level, that could potentially be spelled out. So let's say like no more than 2 stories tall. So 25, maybe 30 feet tall at most, could potentially be up to 3 like townhome style units across, but no more. Those type of things could all literally be spelled out in a form-based code overlay to permit that on these kind of non-conforming lots, whether that is these kind of mid-block lots or whether it is a non-conforming lot. Again, that can all be spelled out, and it would still have to go to town meeting and still have to get standard review and approval and public hearing and the whole process for any type of. So
Okay,
lots of public commentary beforehand.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I shared this at the first forum, just that in a housing production plan, none of these strategies, the town is not bound to make any of these happen, which I think you can view it as you will. The positive way is this is sort of a buffet of ideas that after it's approved by the town council and planning board to pick from and work from. So there's certainly a lot of flexibility there. And as Sam said, I think so. While there's a lot of process, I think ahead of any of these are just ideas. These are just ideas we're throwing out there, and very happy to edit them too right now if we think that they could get some.
I don't know if that's necessary. I just wanted to.
Yeah.
No, I don't know where,
Absolutely.
sometimes I don't know where comments fit in, if they fit in at all, but that would be my concern, I guess.
Yeah. No, these comments are super helpful, and I encourage anyone else who has thoughts to keep sharing. All right, let's get through these in our 10 minutes, and I believe goal number 5, I've heard some comments on this already today, which is build community understanding and support for housing solutions. So how you talk about it, as Sam mentioned earlier. 5.1, expanding outreach in those key locations like the senior center, the food pantry, schools and libraries. So just, yeah, figuring out what are the resources we have and communicating those in some really simple and ubiquitous. Yeah, getting those out and around the town so people know about them. 5.2, similarly, ensuring things are translated into well-spoken Spanish languages like Spanish or Portuguese. A fun part of this project is once this plan is almost done, we're going to put an executive summary together and then translate that as well. So folks that are not, English as a first language can read it too and get a little more sense of what we've been working on. 5.3 touches on educating how to use ADUs. How does that work? How do you go about building an ADU? What are the steps to it? Because it's such a big idea that people are still wrapping their heads around, and maybe your zoning still doesn't work. But education as well. And then 5.4, this could be straightened out a little bit better, which is creating educational materials to help educate folks on navigating the permitting and zoning process. What are the existing programs that are available, as Sam mentioned, and maybe this could go into some of those energy retrofit and accessibility programs. Here's something that Habitat offers. Here's something that the state offers. Here's something that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board of Trustees offers. Centralizing that stuff, and maybe I think communicating it in a lot of different ways is the idea behind a lot of these strategies. Any thoughts on this slide? Cool. Well, I'm happy to let's get through the last one, and then I just wanted to touch on the calendar and let you guys get out of here. Goal number 6 is fostering coordination among town boards and partners to implement the plan. A big, I think, goal and just initiative that Bob was really keen on spearheading and making sure it happens. That our time we put into this gets put to good use, gets taken advantage of, which means some regular monitoring of implementation. So the plan doesn't just sit on a shelf. So asking the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to monitor it, maybe on a quarterly basis, looking through. That chapter I talked about writing is also going to have who's responsible for what and when we suggest phasing it. So should you do it this year, next year, 3 years from now? And that's something when you guys give comments will be helpful to say, oh, I'm not sure like if this is realistic, or maybe this should be pushed to this year instead. So quarterly updates, annual update to the town council, maybe at the end of the year, and that could be aligning with that agenda item Bob mentioned. And then second is maybe a housing roundtable that could also be led by the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to share progress on initiatives, to get people together. And the presentation from the forums shared a few examples from Acton, which has had finishing up their housing production plan. They have had a lot of great collaboration between the town, the housing authority, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and some private developers that have led to something more than the sum of their parts. And it's a lot of hard work to build affordable housing. It's a lot of hard work to get anything done in this field, in this area of things. So just keeping those lines of communication open, collaboration, I think are going to be important. And that is it for the goal number 6 strategies. Any comments here? Yeah, Jonathan.
But just a small comment. I think it probably makes sense to try to align the cadence of the updates from the Affordable Housing Trust to the town council with I think it was the semi-annual progress reports. It feels like there's a lot of overlap between those things, and in fact, it feels like they're probably the same thing. So I would just tighten up whether it's once a year or twice a year, just have those two aligned.
Appreciate that. Yeah, we don't want death by meetings and too many. No, I think that was one comment. Like, yeah, our forums don't have too many meetings. There's already a lot on everyone's plate.
Well, Jonathan, on that note, is that so I'm part of the housing trust and part of this. So it can be coordinated that the one, like I said, because we're central, or someone, doesn't have to be me, but right now it's me, are central to both groups. It would be effectively, you know, a unified front already right there for those two pieces. It's just getting these two groups in front of town council / planning board and zoning board.
Yeah, I would just, again, I would, you know, explicitly try to make sure that we tie those together so that, you know, it's not, you know, there's not an expectation that, you know, like Gail, you would be in front of town council once, you know, as part of the Affordable Housing Trust and so forth. I think it's probably annually is the right cadence, just because it's not like housing production moves all that quickly. And so, you know, kind of an annual update is probably the right time to think about it.
But keep the roundtable part, because I really do think that would be a good, you know, not necessarily simultaneously, but yeah, because I know that for like, I've been now starting involved in this now since last year, but I haven't really been involved with all the town politics, so I don't know how all the pieces necessarily work together.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I really like that. So we'll tighten up the language and the cadence there, keep the roundtable, and then maybe just an annual presentation or update from the trust fund. Okay, last slide here. I just wanted to show you guys what's the plan for the rest of this plan. So next week, we're submitting a draft to Sam to look at, to read through, to mark up and give comments. So then May 6th, which is a Tuesday, going to email out a draft to you all to read. So you have a week to read through it. And then we'd meet on the 13th, another Tuesday, and talk through it similar to this. And then after that, go back and revise, and then get some presentations ready for the planning board and town council. I wanted to just ask, does May 13th, is noon easier for everyone, or evening? And this can also be an email, and probably will also be an email, but I know we're losing Sam in a few weeks, and just also want to say thank you so much for all of your amazing help, Sam. But do you guys prefer lunchtime as opposed to 7 p.m.?
Okay, wait a minute. Sam, are you leaving? What's going on?
My apologies.
That's okay. Yes, I am staying through the ADU bylaw, going to town meeting, taking another position with another municipality.
Wow. Oh, well, glad to have worked with you. But again, so Jonathan, are we going to replace that? Oh, we got you leaving. We have Steve leaving. Oh, that's going to be a challenge.
Yep.
Continuity.
Yeah, well, the council will have to talk about, you know, kind of the replacement strategy, whether it's sort of replacing the same position, kind of modifying it, but, you know, kind of to be determined in terms of, you know, where we go with that, and to be discussed with, you know, Steve as the outgoing town administrator, and, you know, potentially the incoming one as well.
So Noah, with that note though, we should add something in this plan that we have a SAM position, because one of the things that happened was there wasn't a SAM position, and then everything got dropped, and now it had to be like brought back together. So I think that that's a pretty crucial position to have in the town, and to lose it and, you know, have the town be like, yeah, we don't need that anymore. It's like, well, that's what happened in the first place. Yeah. That's why we're here. That's why we ended up having not an HPP plan for so long.
No, yeah, you need a rock star like Sam to get MBTA and ADUs and all this
Absolutely. Stuff. It's a full-time job.
And while the Metro North Regional Housing Services Office and membership in that can address some of it, they don't have a consultant right now, and I don't know when that they will find somebody, because they didn't have anybody respond to the last RFP, unfortunately. So there's 30 years of monitoring that never happened, as far as I can tell, on any of our affordable housing units that was supposed to be done by the town. So there's a handful of different things that, I mean, I can go over it with Noah a little bit more in detail as some of the different components that are really crucial to help us with housing, specifically like annual monitoring that's supposed to happen but hasn't happened, at least, or rephrase it, I have no evidence that it's been done ever. So there are a handful of things that are kind of crucial that need to be done annually, that this position or some variation thereof needs to make sure that they're on top of.
Absolutely. So yeah, no, absolutely. That position for the town, if there's any hope of coordinating housing, the plan's not going to work with just about a bunch of volunteers. You can see even today, you know, we couldn't get everybody on board to have a meeting, and we never really can. So to have somebody that's their job is going to be pretty crucial.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so Sam and I will talk offline about just making sure it's written as well. And also in just coordinating the next meeting, we'll check in with you guys whether noon or 7 p.m. works best to get a quorum. I'm glad we were able to get one today, but that's all I've got, Gail, on my end.
Okay, so where are we at here? Public comment. Well, I guess that was my public comment about having to make sure that we have a SAM position in Wakefield. Do we want to do the minutes or just set those aside? Sam, what do you think?
I did not send the minutes out.
Okay,
They are ready, but I
it.
didn't send them out. I'm so sorry.
No, that's
so
okay.
you'll
I
have
didn't
to
think I
carry
got them
them over
either,
to
but I thought that's fine. We can push it out to the next one. I guess I'm the chair. I don't have any comments. So anybody else?
The one thing you can do if the group wants to vote on a chair, if you don't want to do it, or how they want to handle the chair and vice chair roles from here on out, that is the only other item of business I want to discuss.
You know what? I'm happy I'm happy to move into the chair position if no one cares.
Great, I nominate Gail to be chair.
Second.
Wonderful. Okay, so we need a motion to adjourn. No.
You got to vote on the motion that's standing for you to be chair.
I'm sorry. Okay, we're going to vote on the motion for me to be chair. So I'll do a roll call. Karen?
Which one?
Oh, the motion to have me as chair, vote me in as chair.
Which Karen?
Oh, Karen McMaster. Sorry, I'm like, I'm looking at you, but how would you know that?
Yes.
Karen DeJoy.
Yes.
Carol Plotkin.
Yes.
Sam Huckenberry.
Yes.
Jonathan Shines.
Yes.
John Sager.
Yes.
Very good. Motion has moved that Gail Siebert will be the acting chair for the HPP committee. Okay. Now I can adjourn. Now I can get a motion to adjourn.
You can vote on a vice chair in case you can't be there, or the group could not have one if they really wanted to. And then after that, you can vote to it.
I'm sorry, I guess we were in a hurry. Does anybody on these screens today want to be vice chair?
I was just going to suggest that we wait till the next meeting for vice chair, just since there's so many people not here and so many good people. So that's my motion, that we defer the vice chair until the May 13th meeting.
I do not disagree with that. Okay, so we don't probably have to vote on that. Okay. So now, do I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Anybody second it?
I'll second.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so I need to have does anybody object to adjourning?
No.
Okay, unanimous decision to adjourn at 1:06. Thank you very much, Noah and Sam. Thank you, everybody else, for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.